Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Crypto Check-In, recorded on January the 8th, 2025. I'm your host, Robert Swarthout. I'm joined by my co-host, Andres Sandate. How's it going, Andres?
Good. Happy New Year. It's good
Same
to
you.
be back here. 2025 is here, and man, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a eventful year.
Yeah, we hadn't recorded in a while. I was looking. I couldn't remember the last time I recorded. It ended up being December the 18th. So it feels admittedly longer than that. But happy to be back at it.
Yeah, did you have a good few weeks?
I did. We stayed in town for both Christmas and New Year's, so that was nice. Relatively low key and all the good stuff. So we had some family in town, but otherwise pretty quiet.
Yeah, and we're expecting here in Georgia at least a rare event this week, maybe the potential for snow. So I know that around the country, between the wildfires out in California and the major blizzard-like storm that hit really where I'm from, Kansas, and sort of moved across the country. Yeah, welcome to 25. Mother Nature's having fun with us right now, and thoughts go out to everybody that's being impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It would be, I'm never a fan of snow in Atlanta because it's never a good thing. So I'm hoping we get the minimum, whatever that ends up being. I don't think that but it's looking like 5 to 7 inches. So I guess some people will find it fun.
Well, the kids are all hoping for it. I can let you know that in my house, they're all excited. So we and my wife is conveniently leaving for a work trip to Belize tomorrow. So she's going to be in much warmer temperatures just in time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my wife's out of town this week because it was her birthday. She went out of town with some friends, and she's going to miss all the snow. There may be some on the ground when she gets home on Sunday, but so it's I'm doing horse chores in the really cold and soon to be snow. So.
Well, we've got a lot of headlines, geopolitical headlines, and obviously some news with what's going on in crypto in terms of ETFs and SpaceX and the UAE. So it's just like a geopolitical crypto check-in today in some respects.
Yeah, it's I think I had noticed that too when I was gathering the topics, and I think part of it has to do with you're just having a winding down in the Biden administration, and just kind of we're in that lame duck period. Well, actually. For the president, at least, we do have the new Congress in place at this point. So anyways, let's jump in. The first topic is El Salvador is forced to ditch Bitcoin. And I guess we have to kind of define what ditch means here. But at the same point, I think it is a bit of an about face for them. I don't know how much mainstream press, if any, this was receiving the last couple of years, but their president, I believe, or whoever runs the country, I forget if he's the president, but he has been pro Bitcoin for a while. He always likes to trumpet when they're making money in their Bitcoin, but never talks about when they're down in their investment, that type of situation. But they took a financing package from the IMF, and part of the agreement was they had to ditch Bitcoin, basically having it as legal tender, and had to delete the country's approved Chivo Bitcoin wallet. So they couldn't use it as tender. It's I guess when the rubber meets the road and you really need funds,
That's right.
your opinions may change. I don't know.
I'd love to see that term sheet, right? And just how they actually preface that. But sort of anybody that's ever borrowed money in the business context, you get the term sheet. Is it binding? Is it indicative? In this case, I'm sure that was probably part of the initial round of terms that went out, and so. Well, it was an experiment, and
it was, and part of what was called out that I think it's worth sharing is when they talk about digital assets in the agreement, it goes on to say the potential risk of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin project will be diminished significantly in line with the fund's policies. Legal reforms will make acceptance of Bitcoin by the private sector voluntarily. So basically, the government can't accept it and all that stuff. So Bitcoin's not going away per se in El Salvador, but I can't imagine we see any more tweets about how well their investment's doing by their president.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, I know in the letter we put out for December for the fund, one of the things that I am paying attention to in 25, speaking of treasuries and holdings, is the number of larger U.S. companies that are publicly traded who add Bitcoin to their corporate reserves or treasury management strategy, if you call it that. And we saw some big companies, back away, but put it out and to their shareholders in 24. So that's just something I'm going to be paying attention to. We've covered MicroStrategy and their approach to Bitcoin, which is on the far extreme in terms of aggressive buying and, probably paving some new ground, if you will, from the standpoint of corporate governance and shareholder rights, et cetera. But more of the mainstream companies, call it the S&P 500 companies, I'm going to be watching to see their approach to digital assets in particular, how they, and if they do like to buy Bitcoin or other, cryptos.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned this because I was texting with a friend over the break about how I just been wondering to myself, like why Bitcoin needs to be on the balance sheet of companies. Like I'm a bit of a skeptic in that sense. And I was trying to figure out like an analogy of how I feel about it. And I had come up with, is this the 2024, 25, 26 version of ESG, where everyone was also claiming they caring about it. Now no one seems to, BlackRock doesn't seem to be selling it anymore. So we'll see how it all shakes out over the next really year and a half. But
well, and there has been, over the last, not to get too political, but in the topic of ESG and sort of in one of the same themes is, there have been some notable, I would call it retrenchments by big corporate public companies around their DEI efforts or DE&I efforts, right? So you're seeing, I think McDonald's was in the news recently, maybe earlier this week, about they're going to continue to focus on some aspects of what was their former DE&I strategy. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more activism from investors or pushing companies and particularly boards through public campaigns. And with the proliferation of just information through, not only the mainstream press, but just things like Reddit and chat rooms and Twitter, or now X, like it just, there really is no agenda or issue that's particularly off the table. So Bitcoin or digital assets like included, right? Pro or con. So it's just gonna be a lot to watch. Yeah. If you're going to be a director of a public company these days, or an officer, like probably, the first thing you're probably going to get recommended to do by your attorney is to get some good insurance.
Agreed. Yes. So the insurance guys are gonna be real happy.
That's right. Always somebody.
Yeah. So moving on here, our next topic. I was excited to see. I had wondered when this was going to happen. It hasn't launched yet, but Hashdex is a issuer that has applied to create a crypto index ETF. And I would imagine that that's Bitcoin or Ethereum. I was having trouble finding details on what the makeup is. But over time, when the Trump administration's in place, I imagine this stuff changes pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. No, I mean, I think I think we're going to be talking a lot about ETFs in 25 on this show. I know that another thing that I'm watching for 25 is we saw a lot of ETF activity in crypto in 24. And I think that 25 is going to continue to be this is going to be another big theme. I feel like the ETF's approval in 24, was a lot of news broadly across the whole crypto space. And then I feel like the insiders in crypto really moved on to other things, tokenization and stable coins, etc. But I think for advisors, and certainly I'm in that camp, and the mainstream like investor community, I think ETFs and crypto is still very much like where they're focused. I think that's just understanding the technology. But I see ETFs continue to play a big role and be a big part of the narrative across alts, private markets, including crypto.
Cool. Yeah, agreed. Next topic is SpaceX has been using stable coins in foreign long tail markets to hedge FX risk and deal with without having to send wires, which this is kind of like a no duh, like this was going to happen. But when I first read, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like actually a decent sized company doing this. And it wasn't the company talking about it, admittedly. It was Chamath. I do not know how to say his last name, but
just say Chamath.
Yeah, Chamath. Yeah, we'll call him Mr. Chamath. And he was talking about they use it in the long tail, like I mentioned, and then they swap back this USD once they get stable coins. And I was just like, it just makes so much sense. And they get to do it 24/7, and again, they don't have to deal with the wires and the delay and the FX risk, which is the point.
Right, right. Yeah, for sure. Well, again, SpaceX is working across all these markets with large governments, right? Small governments. I
Right.
mean, yeah. So, I mean, this would be the exact type of company that you would think would take advantage of the technology, and they are.
Right. And it's at first it didn't click, but then I was like, absolutely, because to your point, they're in a lot of countries, a lot of them small,
Yeah,
and they certainly don't need to be storing in for long periods of time, whatever the local currency is in those
right.
markets. So
Yeah,
getting
my
back,
my question is the FX desks. I mean,
yeah,
having worked in the capital markets, like I know that that was a P&L at two of the banks that I worked at,
right,
and I was part of the P&L, not in FX, but in other capital markets products and services. So like my question would be, I'd love to pick the brains of these FX folks. Like could probably reach out and talk to them and just ask them like what impact will stablecoins have on your business over the next like year to 3 years. Like I don't even want to look out 5 because it might just
yeah,
completely change.
for
But
sure.
that's what they do, right? Like they help
Hmm.
their clients, which are
Yeah,
medium to
corporations. Yeah.
publicly traded companies, uh, hedge and make sort of informed capital markets decisions around interest rate risk, currency
Mhm.
risk, right? FX is certainly a part of that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of impact here. We're going to be seeing.
Well, I could.
Like you said, we thought that would happen, but it's cool to
Yeah.
see, companies that we all can sort of identify with and relate to actually doing it.
Absolutely. And, to your question about, talking to those people, those desks, like they have stable coins approaching from one side and they have AI from the other. And like they may be like wondering what is the job that I do anymore?
Yeah.
Because I could see one of those two or both of them just totally swallowing that job.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be fascinating to really understand like where like the nexus of AI, crypto, and data
Hmm.
particularly are coming together, right? If you go look at any bank today on Wall Street, and Wall Street being everywhere, it's in Nashville, it's in Atlanta, it's in New York, right?
Hmm.
But the nexus of all of that 10 years ago up until maybe 3 years ago was probably the Bloomberg terminal, right? And
Right.
that's what you use to transact and all this stuff. And that's where you got your data. Um, it's, and that's always been like the ideal business to be in, right? If you could buy a
Hmm.
business, it's like you'd want to be in the Bloomberg terminal business because everybody's subscribed to it. And I just wonder how that will evolve. Does it go away? I don't know. It's not the point of our
Right.
podcast, but just definitely that nexus of those three things, data,
Mhm.
AI, and blockchain and crypto, it's here to stay, and I think they definitely have to have a strategy around it.
Yep. Our fourth topic, I'm going to put a big asterisk on this one. Either it's true and they didn't want people to know, or it's
Yeah,
untrue. So CZ from Binance fame, he's out of prison and he's doing his whole Giggle Academy thing, where I don't know if it's making him feel better about helping the world or what the point is, but um, he tweeted out towards the end of the year that the UAE holds $40 billion in Bitcoin. That's a big number. Um, and I mean, that's not quite as big as IBIT, the ETF, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's within certainly with 80% of that.
yeah. UAE being the United Arab Emirates, right?
Yes, sir.
The
Yeah,
Middle Eastern
absolutely.
country, like
Yeah.
one of their sovereign funds, you'd think.
So
Um,
you could either take this as he tweeted it, had a link to a source, and then everyone's like, no, no, make that go away. We do not want to talk about this,
mhm.
or it was somehow incorrect. With the tweet being gone, I tend to think that they actually hold it and they don't want it known. So if the U.S. is going to do a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which I'm a bit of a skeptic of personally, I would imagine some other countries will follow suit, or potentially trying to front run it too. So,
Well, I say this in jest, and only because you teed me up. Is we could have an alts portfolio, and I would raise my hand if the U.S. decided to start an alts fund and diversify, and we could have crypto as part of the holdings. We could have the Panama Canal, and then we could have our land play in Greenland,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And that wouldn't be a bad way to start, because you got infrastructure,
Right.
you've got land and real estate holdings, and then you'd have like crypto. So I'm just saying,
Yes.
man, we
Yeah.
could go down a lot of rabbit holes. Well, like we've said this a lot on this show. I mean, these are things that's why this is important to do this weekly, because who knows, in a week or two, we may be able to dispel the rumor, or we may be able to verify it. So
Absolutely.
check in a week.
For sure. Next up in the list, and this is more of like a public service announcement. The IRS came out and said that crypto staking is taxable. Yeah, no duh. The IRS is going to tax it. Even if they don't feel like it's taxable, they're going to make you prove that it's not. But it truly is. You're making an income, like pay your taxes. And I guess the public service announcement here is pay your crypto taxes. Don't be that guy that makes money.
Let me ask you to continue with that public service announcement for those of us that are not currently doing staking. Explain the 101 of crypto staking to people out there listening, or that could come across this portion and are thinking, oh, I've got crypto, maybe I want to stake it. Because income and taxes, right? Nobody wants to pay more taxes than they have to. And it does make sense they would tax it. But explain, why would there be income from crypto staking, and what is it?
So crypto staking, maybe we'll first back up and just kind of refresh. So Bitcoin is proof of work. So computers basically playing a number guessing game, burning a lot of compute time to do that. I guess generation 2 of most crypto networks is what they call proof of stake, basically where individuals within the network hold their tokens within a wallet, and they're coming together to quote unquote secure the network by everyone contributing capital into the network and keeping it there effectively. The staking is, you can think of it as interest. It's very akin to that. So it's built into the network that typically, at least, it's a certain inflation rate, and the staking comes from that. That's, without getting too far in the weeds, I think that's a pretty close answer to kind of suffice at this point. So
yeah, great. Okay, we did our education for today.
Yeah, check mark.
All right.
So our next topic, and I kind of just rolled my eyes when I saw this one. Russia came out and said that they are using Bitcoin to avoid sanctions. Okay, that was probably like the rumor that everyone assumed was the case. Didn't want to talk about it. I'm sure they're doing other things than Bitcoin to avoid sanctions. So I can't single out crypto here.
Right.
But they kind of started talking about this around the time towards the end of the year when the news cycle was bubbling up about a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve. And I think it was just, in some ways, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it could be Putin decided to kind of like needle at the U.S. a little bit. So,
yeah, I don't have a lot to say here other than does not paying your sanctions the same as avoiding them, or using Bitcoin to evade them? I don't know. I don't understand all of the things that go into sanctions. I'm not minimizing the importance here, but just I would love to know who's behind this news headline. Like, is it is an important headline for crypto,
right?
From the standpoint of it is something that we could see proliferate, or is it something that we could see lead to more regulation?
Well, oddly enough, we want regulation,
right?
But we don't want regulation around this kind of side of stuff. So it's not because I think crypto needs to be used to break the law, but just
like you said, he could just be needling us,
right? Who knows with Putin? He is a bit of a character for sure. So, but yeah, this news came from Axios, so
gotcha.
It could be false, could be true. We'll see.
Yeah,
I would imagine as the U.S. tries to figure out regulations and we get into what I believe would be critical thinkers in Washington around crypto, critical positive thinking, we start to hear more rumors like this kind of thing, just to kind of be the other side of the news cycle. So
yeah.
So our second to last topic is around USDT and its drop in supply. This is the second biggest drop ever. The first one was around the FTX collapse. And there was all that liquidity crunch and all that mess that we probably don't want to have to think about anymore. But at the end of the day, this one is likely driven by the MiCA regulations going into effect in the EU. and exchanges like Coinbase Europe are delisting USDT on their exchanges. USDC's there, and then you have RLUSD from Ripple starting to kind of come in the scene. It's just an interesting time, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past. It hasn't lost its peg, which is the important part for everybody, for that matter, because that would be a bit of a bad day if it happened for long periods of time. So
yeah, the supply drop. I think I saw some other headlines around this. Was it a temporary drop per se, or was there a spike that like one day sort of volatility?
This tweet that I'm reading from Blue Chip, which you can find them at bluechip_org on Twitter. This was on the 6th. It was only 2 days old. I don't know the answer. My guess is that we're going to continue to see some drop, because as regulations go in place and people get out of trades in Europe, I think you're going to see some supply drop.
Yeah.
And, not that the drop is big enough. I mean, we're talking like it doesn't say percentage, but I'm looking at a graph. It's probably like a 1.5% drop in total, I guess, market cap. At the end of the day, it's early, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this one draw down a good amount. You start to have that, and if the U.S. gets regulations around stable coins, I can't imagine that Tether is on the inside looking out. I imagine they're going to be a little bit on the outside looking in, just because where they decided to domicile in the Caribbean, but also more specifically, to my knowledge, and I hope I'm not spreading FUD here, that they still don't do third-party audits and attestations. Like, it's purely just they have their in-house accounting team publish something, which is not an audit. I don't by any stretch of the imagination. So,
right, yeah, interesting, something to watch.
Yep. And our last topic is around the lawsuit that the Coinbase and the SEC have going on. The SEC sued Coinbase, saying they were selling some unregistered securities. We've gone over this. The news item here is Coinbase won a motion that they filed to pursue an interlocutory appeal. And what they're appealing is whether transactions that are happening on their exchange and there's no contract between the buyer and the seller, does it actually constitute a security sale? Everyone in crypto is going to say no. I would agree with that. The SEC is saying, oh, no, that's definitely a security sale, obviously, because that's the hammer that they have. But it was a big deal because this is now going up to the Court of Appeals. This is the same level now that the Ripple SEC case is going to be at, and they are literally fighting over the same topic as well. That's one of the things Ripple would be doing their appeal about. And today being the 8th, we're going to record next on the 15th. And what's interesting about the 15th is that is the date that the SEC, the final date the SEC has to file their motion to say what they're appealing in the Ripple case, which obviously is not a topic here on our list, but will be for the next one. My guess is some low-level attorneys having to write that motion, knowing that it's likely going to be, this whole thing's going to be dealt with the Trump administration in a totally different way. So it's a bunch of busy work, but it is the job of that person at this point. So,
yep. There's obviously a change in the administration that's coming in a matter of weeks. So a lot of strategy happening behind the scenes. A lot of change is going to happen at the SEC, as we've talked about. So, it's hard to predict, but we could see both cases go away in a matter of a couple weeks.
Short order. Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, my guess is the cases that go away versus the cases that don't is a very clear line for fraud versus no fraud. The Ripple case, no fraud. The Coinbase case, no fraud. I imagine all the non-fraud cases quickly get swept away or dismissed or whatever needs to happen in those respective instances. So, one thing I didn't put on here that I think I'm going to quickly share is, as I'm researching these topics, people may want to know, how do I learn more about a particular topic, right? And I have found actually quite helpful lately, and obviously a lot of this is coming from Twitter, and that's where crypto lives. But I go into Grok, that's AI, and I ask the question, and it's pulling all that real-time data in. And it is amazing how good of a job it can do at summarizing. Like the Coinbase case, I asked it and I got like 7 paragraphs back I could read about, and it took all the different news sources and tried to bubble up the parts that, at least from my perspective, were quite helpful. So if you're looking for ways to learn more about crypto and just ways to not have to read a million different tweets, Grok may be your answer. So
that was actually one thing that I found fascinating when you and I really started collaborating more consistently and talking about crypto more regularly together. Is you'd said this when we first met, several years ago, about crypto, and that it really lived on Twitter at the time. And there's still a lot of news analysis coverage that lives off of Twitter, but so much of what you and I would call the breaking news, and certainly a lot of perspectives are offered on developments and news on Twitter. Do you think that it stays that way, like, for the long term? I mean, if you think about stocks and you think about real estate and you think about other just asset classes, if we called crypto an asset class, you certainly are now using other forms of media, social media included, to get news. But just curious if
I would say that there's, I only obviously can speak for myself personally here, but I have such a level of distrust in the just general mainstream media to like get just general topics right, or not have some agenda, and I have to figure out what the agenda is to figure out what I really should be knowing here. I think we're a long ways away from it ever swinging back, if it ever does. I think it's a bit of like a tide change of sorts, where
like the major newspapers are more what I call the broadcast news, right? So I remember growing up, there were 3 networks. Fox became a big network like later in my upbringing, but it was Dan Rather, it was Tom Brokaw, and it was Peter Jennings on the nightly news. And then as I got older, I realized, like, that's broadcast news, like that's to reach the broadest audience possible. And so these being like super deep niches and areas of finance and crypto, have their own communities within a specific token and all that, like Twitter, or X as they call it now, is the better medium for keeping up with what's going on. But I just was asking the question of, will the quote unquote mainstream broadcast news ever get crypto? Because we saw an attempt to do a piece on 60 Minutes, and you and I did an analysis on that, and we kind of felt like they didn't really get it, or they didn't really do the whole article and the whole news item justice. And maybe this whole space just needs to be in a much more crypto needs to be in a much more community based, out in the forum of an X to really get to the truth.
I think for the foreseeable future, it's on Twitter. I'll say that, and that's probably measured in years.
And it sounds like AI can help to filter, though, through some of the news. Like you said, you talked about Grok. I'm using two different LLMs or models. So,
and I've even played with it, asking it, because I have a good amount of things that I try to read on Twitter each day to kind of stay up on news. I've asked it to summarize my news feed for me until basically like an executive summary of sorts. And then I went and read my feed and tried to compare it. I'm like, it might save me a lot of time. Like, it's pretty cool what it's doing. So we will find out. So thanks for joining us.
So long as you don't get ads in that AI feed, I think you'll be a satisfied customer, because that's one thing I don't like, is you still can't get away from the ads, right? They got to make money, these platforms.
For sure. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Weekly Crypto Check-In. To stay updated on future episodes, you can find us in any podcast player by searching Teton Crypto Capital or the Weekly Crypto Check-In. Take care.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, trading, or any other advice. The content provided is general in nature and not tailored to any individual's specific circumstances. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult with a professional financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Cryptocurrency trading involves significant risks, including, but not limited to, the potential for loss of all or a portion of your investment, market volatility, and regulatory uncertainty. The hosts, guests, and producers of this podcast are not responsible for any decisions or actions taken based on the information discussed herein. Cryptocurrency is not legal tender in many jurisdictions and is subject to market risks. Past performance does not guarantee future results. This podcast does not endorse or guarantee any investment outcomes or results. Use of this podcast implies your acceptance of this disclaimer.